Hi, Elizabeth. How you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, Jenny?
I'm wonderful. The sun is shining here in Buffalo today, and we're supposed to have snow in a couple days. Can you believe that?
In April.
It's crazy. Almost end of April. It's absolutely crazy. So yeah, but it's shiny here today. So I'm excited, and it makes me feel better when the sun is shining for sure. But let's get into it. So let me introduce Elisabeth Lava to the audience. Elisabeth is a former deadly disease investigator, community health leader, and veterinarian who has helped prepare for and respond to the pandemic. Elisabeth was pushed into spiritual spiritually transformative experiences that led her to powerful healers, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, Ayurveda, and spiritual practices of deep wisdom. Now she bridges the world as a transformational health and life and spiritual emergence coach. Healthcare providers, veterinarians, and conscious leaders hire her to support them to return to wholeness through deep self-care or transition to a different career to find inner joy and peace. And now Elisabeth is here to share her journey with all of us. So Elisabeth, tell us about your journey and everything that you do now. Enlighten us.
Thanks, Jenny. Well, my journey has been very diverse, to say the least. That's why the bio is tries to capture that. Where I am now is on the other side of what's called a spiritual emergence, which turned into emergency. It's a really dramatic spiritual awakening. And so I was really transformed in mind, body, and spirit. And now I am very obsessed about helping others find balance in their daily life in body, mind, and spirit, because I think we're all striving for that. And so I was led to a lot of wisdom during my awakening, both through personal experiences, people I've met, things I've read, trainings I've taken, and then really being shaped by some of the best teachers in the world. So my journey, I actually wrote a book about 2 years of my life that was a few years ago. And that shows the first part of my spiritual awakening. What's not in the book is where I am now in terms of the last 2.5 years has actually included quite a bit of chronic pain. And that was one reason why I think you and I connected.
Right. Yep.
So,
correct. Yeah, definitely chronic pain. I think a lot of my audience has a lot of chronic pain, daily issues, daily struggles, along with chronic illness.
And I think it's interesting that you wanted to interview me about it because I've been pretty private about it.
Okay.
When you're a health, life, and spiritual coach, you're not going to want to talk about your problems. This is not what you're there for. You're there to serve everybody else. But I do notice that I've had a couple of clients who have some chronic pain issues very similar to mine. And by having the lived experience and growing through that and on my own healing journey, I'm able to support them both in mind, body, and spirit. Even though it's mostly body, it affects you in your mind and your spirit. And so even though I am touted as a thought leader on the intertwining of the mental health and spirituality, the interesting thing is if you're not healthy in your body, it's really hard to be healthy in mind and spirit. It's so intertwined.
Agree. Yep.
Yeah. So, and I just love, Jenny, how you have a passion about making sure that people realize they shall not be defined by any kind of illness. It's the labels associated with it, how your mindset, how you can give and love through your life, even though you are faced with physical challenges. And so I'm happy to talk about that aspect and wasn't planning on it, but here we are.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard too, and I, thank you for allowing yourself to share your journey with us, because I think a lot of times people can connect with you based on what your story is and what your history was, and they can relate a little bit better. So like that's with me, I'm an open book. I'll let everybody know what's kind of been going on in my life, and hopefully they can relate to it. And if they do, I got past it and through it. And so can they. And I don't want them to feel defined by their illnesses or anything that they're going through. And there's so much more to life than just what's written on paper, whether or not it's a diagnosis from your doctor or just how you feel every day. We have, we can live life so much better, even if our mind is just set in the right place.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. So, let's see. So where to start my journey related to, chronic illness. So during my awakening, I was told by a couple of very wise people that I was exercising too much, and which I really was. I was, an Ironman athlete, where I had for 25 years, I've been doing triathlon. I think I started doing Ironmans, I think about 10 years after starting triathlon. And I always thought like running a marathon was crazy. And my body didn't really like running that much, even though I did like going out for a few mile jog or whatever, but on dirt roads and soft surfaces. And one thing led to another, where I ended up doing iron distance events. And that's because I was in a marriage where my significant other wanted to do Ironmans. And I did one and I did really well. Like, I mean, I podiumed and I did an Ironman unless, but it was, not without a cost to the body though, and I didn't really realize just how much I was damaging my body. I mean, it's great to exercise in a balanced way, but doing iron distance triathlons is not balanced. I actually ended up in the hospital after that first Ironman. So even though I broke 11 hours, which was my personal record, and was, running alongside of, elite athletes, my body told me it was really shut down afterwards. I was in the hospital due to hyponatremia. So anyway, so and the way I was led into triathlon was, as a little girl, I loved dancing. And I was actually, born quite deformed, where my legs were so turned in when I was born, they thought I was deformed. And there was this constant effort to rotate my legs outwards. Like when I was in second grade, when my legs were hanging off the chair, my toes were not only touching, they were pointed backwards somewhat.
Really?
So yeah. So my family let me take ballet classes, even though my siblings weren't allowed to, because we all just had this innate wanting to dance. And, but I was allowed to. And then I injured myself when I was 16 years old. I was in a fine arts high school, attempting to become a professional ballerina. And I was touring with companies, and there was a lot of effort in trying to get me so turned out that I was doing things that was unhealthy for my lower spine. And I did what's called a glissé, split jeté, and I heard something pop, and I was 16 years old, and I couldn't stand up straight after that moment. And it was so painful, I had to drop out of the fine arts high school. And when I went to a regular high school for my junior year, I asked my doctor, I'm like, I can't just stop movement cold turkey. I need to keep doing something. And he's like, why don't you try swimming and buy a bicycle? So that's what I did. I joined the swim team, loved it, loved cycling. And then when I went out to college in CU Boulder, my sister used to be a triathlete. She called me and she said, you're the mecca of triathlon. Why don't you try running? And then you could do triathlon. And I'm like, I don't know about running, Well, I tried it. It actually wasn't that bad at running. Not my favorite. And, but I ended up doing triathlon, and that was really my mind, body, and spiritual practice, was doing extreme physical activity in nature. And I loved it so much. And it was very healthy, but I definitely was doing it in an unbalanced way. And I had a car accident when I was 19, 20 years old. And, that did actually some nerve damage to my upper spine. I have something called parascapular nerve palsy, which are the infraspinatus and supraspinatus, which are the muscles above and below your spinous process that kind of comes off your scapula, your shoulder blade. Those are just atrophied. So it's kind of like I have a torn rotator cuff on that side, but the side impact, I can't believe I survived. When I saw the car afterwards, because I was unconscious afterwards, I don't remember the accident. I looked at my car and I was like, how the hell did I live through that? Wow. And so I have a lot of arthritis in my upper spine there. And then when I was doing triathlons, I noticed when I would come off the bike, are you hearing an echo?
No? Nope.
Okay, sorry. So when I came off the bike, I noticed it was hard for me to stand up straight, and I had some back problems, but I kept doing core work and Pilates and all these things. So during my awakening, I felt guilty about how much exercise I was doing. And I'm like, yeah, it's out of balance. I need to meditate more. I need to rest more. Well, I meditated so much and rested so much and dropped so much of my physical activity, and my spine pain was worse than ever. And it was so bad. So I kept going to massage therapist. And I noticed I was getting weak. And I'm like, I don't know, like not just normal level of weakness for someone who backs off in the exercise. And I went to my primary care doctor and he didn't, he's like, oh, well, I'll send you this osteopath. He can do a more extensive evaluation on you. And sounds like your spine needs to get in alignment. And I was seeing chiropractors and finally ended up in the hands of a quote medical massage therapist. And when he asked me, tell me your story, he was furious. And I go, what? And he goes, have you not been evaluated? And I go, yeah. I tried telling the story and he goes, lay down. And I was like, what?
Okay.
And so he wanted me to lay on my stomach on his table. And right before I lay down, I saw a map of dermatomes. And since I'm a former veterinarian, I knew right away when I saw that this is not your average massage therapist. In fact, I don't think he's a massage therapist. And and he ran his pin down the back of my left leg. It was numb. That's how unaware I was what was going on with my spine. And so I stood back up. I just was like, I sat back up. I had tear rolling down my face going, oh my God. And he goes, Elisabeth, in a thick Russian accent, I am not touching you until you go get an MRI. You hear me? And I was like, I can't do a Russian accent very well. I tend to do German ones since my parents were Germany. But I was like, what? I need an MRI. And he holds up, his little spine figure, his little
mannequin thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the mannequin thing. And he's like pointing with the pin at all my intervertebral discs. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, are you telling me I've got a damaged vertebrae or what? And he's just shaking his head and so after a few sessions, I got the MRI and I ended up in the hands of a spinal rehab specialist and going back to see this man from Russia. After about 4 or 5 sessions of him manipulating me, doing massage and adjustments and all this stuff, I looked at what I said, are you a former spinal surgeon? And he goes, yes. And I was like, are you doing this to prevent people from having to have unnecessary surgery? Well, of course. And I was like, oh, well, gosh, that's so cool. Wow. So the spinal rehab specialists are like, they looked at my X-ray and my MRI and they showed anterolisthesis, which is where your spine is sliding forward. It's non-alignment anymore. And so basically, and a bunch of other things wrong with my spine, but that was the main thing. And they said, we're going to send you to physical therapy. And if your pain doesn't come down and your function doesn't improve, we're going to recommend fusing your spine. So I'm asking about the surgery and I'm like, what does this mean for me? And they said, well, we would just fuse it at one spot, but you'll be down and out for like 6 months. And they don't use the word down and out. That's my phrase. Like, you're going to be in recovery.
But you will be. Yeah. You're not going to walk again for quite a while, but yeah.
Yeah. So basically at that point, I was actually sort of trapped in a state where I didn't even have health insurance. And I was paying out of pocket for the MRI and all the doctors and physical therapy appointments because I was on the Affordable Care Act plan. And they actually told me, do not get in your car and drive. And I was living out of my van at the time. And I was like, okay. And I'm in a house now. But anyway, so when I got back to Colorado, I just really dove into physical therapy as much as I could. I got an inversion table, which mine is awesome. I hang down from my hips. I have a partner now and he's an expert in Reiki and that's a form of healing energy. And it's crazy how much that helps me. I'm such a left brain scientist. I had kind of thought Reiki was not a real thing. And now I'm the recipient of it and it's amazing. So now I'm at the point where I have most of my strength back on my left side. My pain is no longer an 8 to 9 each day. I couldn't stand or sit for more than 20 minutes at a time before. And now I can sit for a couple hours, but I need to move in order to not be in a lot of pain later in the day. I need to take lots of breaks. I still might need to get my back fused, but I don't need to with any immediacy like there was before. And I'm going to a chronic pain specialist at the Stedman Clinic. It's a very famous clinic in Colorado. In May. And I'm going to see what else I can do with him to either not have to have surgery or postpone it long enough to where the technology comes quite a long ways. The problem about getting your spine fused is that, okay, so where that part where your spine is fused, you're stable there and the pain associated at that spot goes away. But then that stiffness at that spot, then the rest of the juncture between your vertebrae above and below now are going to start moving more. and you may need to have that fused then later. I'm like, oh,
It's like a domino effect.
yep. Yep.
Wow, that's scary.
So I have two friends that are about my age that had their spine fused because of anterolisthesis at the same spot. And so I'm watching their healing journey. And I was told by my physical therapist, be cautious on watching their journey and where they are. I said, why? And he said, well, the first couple of months, they're going to be so much better, pain-free after the initial healing of the cutting and all that of the surgery and the nerves starting to grow back. And he said, in a few years, they may actually have to have the other parts of their spine fused because of that initial fusion. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I really want to wait to see how far, because technology is in terms of the spine. I mean, already now the spine fusions are so much lower in terms of minimally invasive, and the recovery time is much faster. But long term, in terms of healing, I want to see that before I actually go get surgery. So I'm so thankful. I have to be very careful each day, but there's lots of other things I do. So I'd love to talk about the spiritual side of my healing. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just want to circle back just a minute. Okay,
Sure.
you said a couple of your friends have this interior say that. How do you say that?
Enterolisthesis. It's entero meaning
Listhesis.
kind of sliding forward. Listhesis.
Is that something that could be, I don't want to say common, but is that something that you can get just as you age? If you have like arthritis in your body, is that?
Great question. So I don't know about those two women's journey and other people's with enterolisthesis. I just know that one of the aha moments was when I was looking at my MRI and my x-rays. They're like, you have scoliosis. I'm 53 years old and I'm just now learning that I have scoliosis. So what happens is the side, when you have a curvature in the spine, those facet joints, those are the little, where the bony protuberances on the side of each vertebrae come together. That actually helps really hold your whole spine together. Each one of those joints do this on either side of the vertebrae. So they get kind of banged together on the side where it's curving inward, sideways, basically. And so that point at L4 and L5, where my facet joints bang together, there's so much arthritis that you can't even see the joint space anymore. And so there's it's not smooth there anymore. So all of that inflammation from the arthritis has caused bone spurs, and it just doesn't want to stay aligned anymore. So it pushes the spine out of alignment. I don't know other people's journey. I think it's pretty similar, where they have either a malformation, which basically my whole spine was malformed. It shouldn't be a big curve from side to side. We all have a natural curve to our spine, but it goes front to back, right? There should not be much of a curve from side to side other than when you want it to. And mine is just, fixed sideways and in different ways. It undulates. And so mine's not that bad, but it's enough. And I think the car accident when I was young, when I was 19 years old, probably impacted the parts of my spine on the sides that were already touching, where the accident just smashed them really hard together. So that accident, and I knew it when I was like 20 years old and I woke up in the hospital. I was like, I'm going to be paid. I just knew I was going to be paying for it later. I just know how that works. When we have an accident that's pretty severe, we're hurting quite a bit after that. And then we have a healing stage. And then later in life, you tend to have arthritis and implications from that accident earlier in your life. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and having chronic pain in your spine is something that can just completely be mind-numbing pain. I have an uncle who suffers from chronic spine issues. He had an injury when he was young as well, and it's just been, as you age, I think between the arthritis and inflammation and just movement, it takes a toll on one's body. But it's good that you have, to postpone, I think, surgery as long as you can. I mean, technology is forever evolving in the medical field, and I think that I would hope that if and when you do have to go through a surgery, I definitely wish you the best, because spine surgery just sounds so scary to me.
Yeah.
It's so big and scary.
So since we're both coaches, I wanted to share this little story about having pain and then interacting with a client.
Oh, sure.
So I'm just being diagnosed with all the stuff with my spine, and I'm talking to this client that I've actually known for a really long time. And I'm asking him how he's doing. And so I was like, so how's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10, like today? And he's telling me, oh, it's like a 2. was like, okay, so how is it from day to day? You know, because I know he's had severe pain in the past, and it's really affected his mind and his soul tremendously. And he's like, well, I'll have a day occasionally on 3, rarely a 1, but I'm pretty much at a 2 now. And I went, oh, and I'm like, oh my God, what is my pain on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'm like, it's like an 8.5 today. And,
Oh,
and
gosh.
it made me realize how much I needed to do deeper self-care.
Yes.
And so it was so wild coaching someone through that. And then being able to support my client through mindset around that, I actually then applied to myself. I'm like, I am not this body. It's a beautiful temple for my soul. It's temporary. But I came from a very German Stoic family. So a friend of mine joked with me, like I did too. I came from a stupid German Stoicism where you just like transcend the pain so much that you're not really listening to your body. And so that's what was getting me into trouble, was that I just kept doing what I was doing before and not pausing to do deep self-care. So that was another epiphany by interacting with clients and friends. And then knowing that, you know, what the status of your body is can affect your mind, your spirit. So I have a client who's really struggling with depression because of spine pain. And I've had moments like that too, because in my spiritual path, we talk about the soul, unlimited soul. And it's really hard to feel unlimited when you're either in
When you're
chronic
in
or severe
pain,
pain.
right?
So again and again, friends of mine on my spiritual path are like, are you using the scientific healing affirmations? And my teacher is Yogananda. And so I have a little orange booklet and I have it by my bedside. And I need to be doing it every day. So when you come out of meditation is a great time to both introspect and do affirmations. And so one of the affirmations that I love that I should be doing every day is we basically close your eyes and we look towards our forehead. And one of the affirmations is, I think my life to flow. I know my life to flow. From brain to all my body to flow. Streaks of light do shoot through my tissue root. The flood of life in vertebrae doth rush through spine in froth and spray. The little cells are drinking, their tiny mouths are shining, all are shining. The little cells all are drinking, their tiny mouths all are shining. So it's and
Wow.
I visualize when I'm looking at my third eye, I visualize light coming in, going down my spine into the place where my spine is unhealthy, and that light healing my spine. If I
Wow.
had heard this 5 years ago before my awakening, I would like, yeah, ladies off the rocker, you know, because I'm such a left brain scientist. But there definitely is huge power in connecting with your spiritual practice to heal you in mind and body. And you
Yes.
need to be balanced in body and mind to advance spiritually. So that's been my added practice, which I actually need to do daily, which I have not been, which I need to. And so I'll be teaching meditation at a yoga festival coming up. And one of the things I'm going to do at the end is pick an affirmation for everyone to repeat out loud, then softly, then in a whisper, then internally, silently, again and again and again, whatever it is they need to work on. So I'll just kind of read the crowd and pick an affirmation. So the scientific healing
Beautiful.
affirmations are really beautiful for healing both in body, mind, and spirit.
I couldn't agree more with that, because I and it's funny that you said, you know, like I think like this whole new spiritual part of, you know, healing your mind to heal your body has become something that is different for people, that is not medical, because we're always turned to doctors and nurses and all the, you know, the people that have the fancy letters after their name. But sometimes it's really just talking to yourself and finding, believing who you like, just everything internally. And you know, a lot, I think a lot now of what I listen to is people say like woo woo, air quotes, you know, like and a few years ago you had mentioned like Reiki and, you know, all this, like, you know, the crystals and whatnot and all these different types of healing. But when you go back hundreds of years, I mean, that's the type of healing that our ancestors had and believed in. And it worked. Like, why did we have to, stray so far into the medical field? And I mean, conventional medicine is obviously, I mean, there's a need for conventional medicine, absolutely. But I think people that don't necessarily want to take the time to work on themselves just want a magic pill, and to be like, just give me the magic happy pill that's just going to make me happy and pain free all day without having to do all of the other things. And it is mindset. It is looking into yourself and finding, being spiritual or faith or however you want to look at it, but to the power of your own healing, that you have the power to really heal your soul from the inside out. And I have definitely taken on more of those modalities as these years have come up, and and that's why I'm sitting here, because it's been the only thing that's kept me going and staying positive through all this stuff that's happening around us in this crazy world that we now live in. And I think it's absolutely fascinating and inspiring. And I love to hear all these other healing journeys that everybody's going through. And it all stems from, a positive mindset and healing yourself and finding a way that works for you. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful, Jenny. I totally agree.
Yeah.
And one of the other parts of wisdom I was led to is Ayurveda. You mentioned it in the beginning, which is a holistic health system that's really based on the Vedas, and the Vedas means truth. It's based on the scriptures, and it's a very holistic way of living. And I think, the whole part about taking a pill to fix things is actually described in my book, where backing up from the mind, from the body, and going to the mind. In my book, I describe my leadership of a federally funded mental health grant that was from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. It was designed to integrate mental health services into primary care and to reduce stigma around mental illness, mental challenges, by basically encouraging the public to take mental health first aid. So we have first aid for the body. There's actually a first aid you can take for mental health. And it's the same similar concept, that you're providing initial aid in a way so that you're saying things that are supportive, you're listening, you're not going to say anything damaging, right. And hopefully get the loved one, friend, or someone that is somehow comes into your moment of life where you recognize they need assistance, to get them in professional hands. So just like calling 911, you're doing CPR or first aid until the professionals get there. So I was promoting that. And I was pushing myself so hard because I will talk about this, my constitution, dosha, prakriti, depending on how you say it, was pitta, was very fiery, push, overdoing all the time. And so I did that in my profession. So I'm the health department director. And then I decided to take on, instead of just physical health, I'm taking on the mental health, because I'm telling my colleagues they're all intertwined. So I'm pushing so hard on that. And then I have a substance use prevention grant for children. And it was through a state marijuana tax fund. So I'm adding those two into running the health department, which is more addressing the physical side. And I'm pushing myself so hard that I come home so stressed out. I wouldn't get angry at my partner, but I just was like not in a good mood. I was so stressed. I still never said an ill word towards him or anything, but I would talk about work too much and stress. So he had enough. He left my life. And I was like, oh my God, I just lost the most important person in my life. And it was so upsetting that I have a very strong inner critic. And so I spun into deep clinical depression because I kept shredding myself inside about all the things I said and did wrong, and how I had lost my favorite person in my life. And I couldn't get out of it. And it's crazy. So through the mental health grant, I was basically using some of the resources that I brought into the community, like an employee assistance program, where if you're employed, hopefully your employer will provide a program where they pay for you to go to some mental health counseling, a few sessions if needed. So there I was in those sessions, and they wanted both my primary care provider and the mental health professional was encouraging me to go on antidepressants. more my primary care provider and actually my OBGYN and the mental health professional. But so I got the prescription, I got home, and I'm like looking at the label, and I had signed up for a half Ironman, which I love that distance. And I'm like looking at the back of the label, and I'm like, okay, wow. Well, first of all, there's stomach issues, and I already have enough stomach issues. I don't want to take this and not be able to do a triathlon because that's part of what's important to me. And then I'm looking at the withdrawal symptoms, and there's just exactly what I was already going through. I'm like, this is just postponing what I'm already going through. And I'm like, there's gotta be another way. I look in the mirror and I went, oh, this is not a coincidence. I'm in the middle. And this is like one of the most painful things. Like, okay, we talked about spine pain, but depression, like my whole body was hurting. I could barely sleep at night. It was one of the most painful things I've ever been through. And it was all in my mind. Yeah. So I was like, there's got to be another way. So of course, there's certain people that I met that, I kind of got into like, what is this mindfulness stuff? So I went to the library and I started checking out books about mindfulness and meditation. And I was starting what's called a spiritual emergence. So I was starting to explore spiritually. And I had no idea that's what I was doing. I just knew that what left brain scientists were pushing on me was either not working for me or not right for me. And so I started practicing being fully present and meditating, and I ended up having a profound spiritual awakening. And through that spiritual awakening, I was led to a very ancient form of meditation, and I meditate every day. And it's so incredibly healing, calming, and empowering, but I was doing it so much that my spine started slipping out of alignment more. And I didn't know my spine, right? That I had scoliosis. I didn't know I had interleusis. I didn't know any of that. And so it just made it worse. And I felt internal critic. I was feeling guilty about exercising. So I just really wasn't exercising very much. Well, it turns out there was some innate wisdom within my body that knew that I needed to exercise a certain amount in order to help keep my spine aligned. So now I'm going back to somewhat of what I was before, just not as extreme. I'm not doing Ironmans anymore, but I'm still much more active than I was while I was basically pretty much living like a nun. I was living in the mountains all by myself, just meditating for hours and hours and hours, reading scriptures, and there goes my body. So Ayurveda, the interesting thing is that by becoming more balanced and not having a dosha imbalance, and mine was pitta, and so there's vata and kapha, and your listeners are welcome to get in touch with me or any Ayurveda practitioner to understand that better. But then I was able to recognize my unhealthy patterns about just basic things, like what time am I going to bed? Am I going to bed at the same time and getting up early, and just super basic. But then there's things like, what are you eating? Is it causing your imbalance to get even worse? And so I then was educated on what foods I needed to avoid and what foods I should gravitate to. I learned about pranayama, certain breath work that is appropriate for my constitution. And the other is certain yoga poses that are better for me. And that helps me get so centered as well that then I'm able to meditate more deeply. But I still had to go back to some of my old physical practices outside of, I'd already been practicing yoga for 20 years as well, teaching for 10. But I had to be led to a deep form of both meditation and Ayurveda to then really come into wholeness. And so, and then of course the healing affirmations were part of it. So hopefully that explains my experience with being prescribed a pill and having to turn to deep Eastern wisdom of not only meditation, but some scientific healing affirmations and other practices I do.
Ain't that fascinating though? You almost reach a certain point in your life where you're like, something has to change. Something isn't right. You almost, and I think like mine was, I turned 42 last September, and me reaching upwards into my 40s a few years ago kind of made me think, okay, I'm getting there to that whole midlife crisis when people, and you're like, is something supposed to crazy happen to me? Like, am I supposed to do like jump out of a plane or get more tattoos or, you're waiting for like this thing to all of a sudden be mentally in your body. And you're like, is something going to happen to me? But I just realized that everything that I've been through since being a kid mentally, or I should say more with my health challenges, has really put me in a place of where I don't want my children to see me suffering every day. And I kind of was just like I was just unhappy. I was just unhappy with who I was. I was very stressed all the time, taking things internally. I think it's, I mean, being a mom, being a woman, there's just so many things that we have to do on a daily basis. And there are so many tabs open in our brains all the time. And I'm a perfectionist, and there was just too much going on. And I didn't want to be that person around my kids anymore. And being a stay-at-home mom, they seen me do everything. But I wanted to take time to sit on the floor and play with my kids and do that without going, okay, my back hurts, or moaning, to get up and, dear God, I hadn't reached 40 yet. And here I am moaning and I can't, move. But something just kind of like flipped the switch where I was just done feeling like that. And the only thing I had known was going to all these different specialists and going to all these different doctors. And I started looking for alternatives, and you just start looking for different ways. And whether or not they help you or they don't, you have to believe that there is something else out there that may help you get into a better place. And while it's not for everybody, but I think that unless you say, well, I've tried that and I've done it, you're never going to know. I mean, even when it comes to meditation and stretching, yoga, I'm definitely doing more stretching nowadays. And I think that that's very important to keep your body like moving. You're just going to stiff. It's just, like if your car doesn't run and you don't start your car battery and it's just going to stop, you have to keep your body moving. It's all parts. They're all connected. Just as you need oxygen for your heart to beat and your lungs to breathe, I think that your muscles need the blood flow and they need to move. Otherwise, they're just not going to, they're going to stop. So stretch your body and move and breathe into these movements and believe that there's something else out there than paying a $25 copay every time you got to go see a doctor to tell you, yeah, you should probably, be put on a anti-anxiety medication because your numbers look like you're a little stressed today, and it's, you just want people to be more aware that there's other modalities out there to feel better. But do it and believe in it, and don't try it once or twice and be like, oh, that didn't help me. You got to be consistent, like with anything else, with any other practice. Consistency is key. You have to continue to do these things, and to believe that they can help you. So don't give up.
For sure. For sure. So you brought up two thoughts of mine. One is, so I come from a family of doctors and nurses that are very Western medicine. And I've worked in their clinics, in their offices, and I've seen how much they're pushed by insurance and how they have to see patients so briefly before they run off to the next one, because there's not enough doctors, there's not enough family nurse practitioners, there's not enough physician assistants, and insurance doesn't reimburse enough for them to spend more time with each patient. So they're doing the best they can. And one thing through working through public health for 20 years, since I was a health department director and in working at state level, is that learning about behavior change is really difficult. So that behavior change doesn't happen through a brief conversation with your physician. And so health insurances and doctors' offices are recognizing that, and they're starting to hire health coaches in order to have those longer time with someone who then talks to you. And so like I've been trained in motivational interviewing, which is figuring out what's your readiness, your stage of readiness for change. If they're just not on the spectrum where they're ready to change, it needs to come from them internally. But sometimes they're at a stage where they just need a little nudge, and then you help them with their behavior change. And it usually takes months to have a new habit form. And so I'm becoming national board certified through the same organization that nationally board certifies physicians, so that physicians will know that I'm the real deal. I've been well trained in doing that. And once I get and I'm going to sit for those boards, even though I became a health coach about 3.5 years ago, I'm going to finally just go ahead and get the national boards so that I can either work in an integrative health clinic, or work for a health coaching company remotely. So that's my goal. And so, because I just know how hard it is. And in public health, we try to change population health by looking, instead of just each individual, is shaping the community to make it easier for them to make healthy choices and more difficult for them to make unhealthy choices. And so I've been on that side. And then the other piece about moving that you said is really funny for me, because in my personal experience, so I go to my first physical therapy appointment after a spinal rehab specialist says, yeah, you've got to work on these certain parts of your spine. Physical therapist lays me down on a table and she goes, okay, I want you to put your hands on your transverse abdominal muscles. And I want you just simply to contract them. I couldn't get them to contract. And I was like, what? She was just doing abdominal press. I could barely do any abdominal press. I just looked at her and I had tears in my eyes. And she goes, what's wrong? And I go, I used to be an Ironman athlete. I've been to Hawaii Ironman, and I can't even contract my, and then she goes, well, what happened? And I told her, well, I was just crazy triathlete. And then I had spiritual awakening. And then I started sitting to write my book. I sat to meditate, and I sat driving around in my van, and I sat reading scriptures. And she looked at me and she goes, that's nice. Well, it's time to move. And I looked at her and I go, oh yeah, but the name of my book is Stillness and Wilderness. And she goes, I don't care what the hell your book is. It's time to start moving again. It was really funny.
Oh no.
So coming to stillness is really important for spiritual practices. But yes, when you're not sitting and meditating and reading, and it's time to move. And we all sit at our computers way too much, right? So out of the modern technology. Yeah. So
yeah, that's for sure. It is, there is a lot of, and I mean, we're all guilty of it. I definitely spend too much time on my cheeks, not the ones on my face, but and I bought one of those yoga chair balls, that you sit in, and because I've had diastasis recti, so I've got horrible core, and it's, I'm trying to use it more so I can be more aware and conscious of my center, and even when I'm cleaning the house or picking things up, to be aware of your core, because when I realize that I get a lot of lower back spasms sometimes, but that it's all connected. Your core is such a huge part of a lot of your back and how everything gets either pulled to one side or, whatever. But every time I even vacuum, I'm contracting like my core in a different way than just letting it all, flail all over the place. So I think when you become aware of what it is that your body can do and you can control, you definitely can help assist the muscles that haven't, I guess, I haven't used my core like that in so long. They're just, but the core holds so much of your back muscles. And I think I'm very weak there. So I definitely have to do more back strengthening exercises. And it's hard because it hurts. And they're muscles that you haven't used like that, in a long time, or even when you do start moving them. But to be aware that that, then you can fix it. But until you become aware of that, you're just going to expect it to just be like, oh, maybe I can just go get a massage, or maybe I can just go see the chiropractor. And while they can help you, they're not going to fix you. They're not band-aids, they're not, nothing I don't think is permanent where you can actually fix. You have to continue. It's a continuous practice, just like with anything, everything is a continuation, and you have to practice. Just as if you have to take care of your body, you have to take care of your body. Nobody else is responsible to take care of your health. You are responsible to take care of your health. So, and this is something that I have just literally learned in the past couple of years. So I am, very passionate about letting people know that they can do it, but they have to be aware, and they have to want it, because you can't, like you said, if somebody's not ready to make that change and to do that, sometimes you can, just poke them just a little bit, be like, hey, you're so close. You got this. You can do this. I know you can do this. But if they're not ready, they're just not ready. You can't push them,
Yeah. I do remember a colleague, when I was working at the state health department in Arizona, I used to see that he always had pop cans. Like it was really hilarious. Whenever he had an empty pop can, he'd put it on his desk. And then he had, one of these wraparound desks, and he had like columns of it. And then eventually I noticed that he wasn't adding anymore. And eventually they were being removed, and he started transforming, physically. And I popped him, like, how you doing? I'm like, man, and he told me a story, and he's like, oh man, my doctor. And I go, what? He's like, he came in one day and he goes, this is what more doctors need to do with their patients, I swear. He goes, you keep on the same track you're going right now, in 3 years, you're going to have a massive heart attack and die. You hear me? Yeah.
Oh my God.
And the patient was this friend of mine, was just looking at me and went, whoa. And he's like, you don't exercise, you smoke, you drink pop, you push yourself at work. And he hadn't had like gentle conversations. He just decided to just do one whammo. And that man realized, because he was married and had a couple of children, he was like, oh, okay, doc, what do I need to do? And so he had a harsh conversation, but he had it inside of him to start changing. So I think there sometimes need to be kind of a come to Jesus conversation between doctors and their patients. And it needs to be, that's just tough love, having those conversations. And I do think physicians need to do that more. I definitely had that from that physical therapist. Yeah. That's nice. I don't care what the title of your book is.
Right. Well, and it's just like, people have this midlife crisis because it takes them till midlife to realize, oh shit, I ain't getting any younger. I'm getting older every birthday. And if I don't do something, I'm going to end up with heart disease, or I'm going to have a stroke at, whatever. And yeah, I mean, you do need to be aware that what you're doing today is going to affect your tomorrow. That's just how life works. But you have to take care of your body. And if you want to be there to see your kids, have children and be the great grandparent that, can be there for their baptism and watch them grow up, then you got to take care of your body today and your mind, because your mind is ultimately what takes care of your body. So you got to do the practices.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. Yep. Yeah.
Can we just go back real quick? You were mentioning about with the whole Ayurveda practice and the different doshas. How does one find out which one they are? Or is that something they do?
Yeah. So there's questionnaires and assessments you can take online. And I'm developing one that's going to be part of my program for people who are becoming holistically health coached by me. And so, yeah, it's a series of questions. I remember taking one for the first time. I don't know if I should say any specific company name, but you can just basically look online. And if you want to reach out to me, you can just basically look Ayurveda quiz assessment, and you can take it online. Usually when you sign up for those, they end up asking you for your email, and then they're selling you products that can support you. And a lot of those products are great, but if you don't want to do that and you just like to work with an Ayurveda practitioner, you can look in the phone book and just look up Ayurveda practitioner and see who is in your area, or you can reach out to me if you'd like.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's good to know. I don't even know if there's any in my area. That's something that I haven't Googled yet. Thank God for Google.
Yep. No, I did want to say something else about that. So I actually mentioned in the back of my book. So my book ends with about 7 pages of resources for someone who might be having a dramatic spiritual awakening. And there's a section on subsection in there about grounding. And I mentioned going to see an Ayurveda practitioner, and I can't remember the name of it, but there's basically an international association of those people who are certified and knowledgeable enough in Ayurveda. So you definitely want to take a look at the back of my book if you have time, and I'm happy to offer free Audible copies of that. And the e-print book is very short, and my story is really crazy, and I don't really go over it in this interview. But the main point really is this, and the list of resources in the back. Each book and webpage it's listed is profound. It like opens you up to an entire larger world of resources for you. It's very dense. And I'm actually thinking about expanding that to a much larger book in the future instead of my crazy story that led me to all that wisdom. But that's just something I wanted to mention in terms of make sure you're going to be working with someone who is actually properly trained in Ayurveda.
That's good to point out. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So tell us, the audience, a little bit more about your book. You had mentioned and now I am passing here, Stillness and Wilderness, a bold ride from despair to deep wisdom and love. So when did you actually, this is something that you just recently put out, or a couple years ago, I think you said, right?
Yeah, I published it last year.
Oh, last year. Okay.
The transformation actually probably started in 2018. It was hard to like pinpoint exact moment because it was, but the most dramatic part starts where my partner has left me, and then you see me spin into clinical depression. So that was in 2019 that or is it 18? Yeah, it was actually 2018 that the book starts. Yep. And I think my transformation actually started a little bit before that because some experiences I had while camping alone by myself in the desert. But yeah, so 2019, and then but I published it last year, and I've had more transformation since then, but and have been led to more and more wisdom. That's one reason why I'm thinking about expanding the list of resources in the back to a separate book.
Okay. And I think when you had said about just a little bit ago about your transformation, I think as a person, as you kind of go through these different stages in life, when you do realize that you've got this sort of new outlook on life and this new awakening, you're forever growing and transforming, and reaching different levels to your personal growth. And you're always healing, in your mind, in your body, in your spirit, and your soul. And I think that you have to continue to be aware of your surroundings as well. If you're always going to be around negative people and negativity, that's not going to be doing anything good for you. You have to the last podcast I had just released last week, I talked about, sometimes you do house cleaning and sometimes you need to do a life cleaning, because when you're growing and certain people around you are not, or they're affecting you more than you wish that they were, you don't realize how much that can affect you mentally. And then we all internalize it, and it causes stress, and it'll cause, a host of different health problems. So I think we need to be aware of our surroundings and our environment, and to get rid of what isn't serving you anymore, to be able to grow the way that you want to grow and that you need to grow. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of just went down that rabbit hole.
No, it's not a rabbit hole at all. It's definitely choosing where you live. Is it a positive influence on your choices? The people you're with are the most profound. Are they? And I was just looking at my list. So when I was going through something very dark yet again after the end of my book, I made a list of things, daily practices that was, and one of them was be around spiritual company, but with healthy boundaries. So even though you may have healthy people that you're letting into your life, also have healthy boundaries to keep all those relationships healthy. And definitely we all are born into families that we may or may not like enjoy being around.
Right.
And during a spiritual awakening, your view of your relationships will change dramatically. And there's usually a big shift in how you interact with others that others are not going to be very comfortable with. So I do believe that your point about spiritual, about environment, who you're around, is profound. And I actually help my clients who are going through, I'm a spiritual emergence coach, that aspect of my coaching. I ask them about who they're with and their relationships, and help them navigate that, because it's hard when you have a spiritual awakening, and those that you're used to being around have not had one.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's huge. Mm-hmm. It's very huge and scary, because you don't know how to kind of navigate that, and that's new. But I think boundaries, at least, is a good start when you're around, especially if it involves your family, to make sure that you don't let them into that space that you were used to just saying, yeah, okay. And, letting everybody kind of being the yes person, you gotta know that it's sometimes saying no is just better for your mental peace. and you got to be okay with that. And it's okay to say no. It's okay, So, but yeah. Well, all right. Do we have anything else we want to mention?
If anyone wants a free copy of my Audible copy of my book, to go to my webpage, which is Elisabeth with an S instead of a Z. So it's Elisabeth lava, like comes out of volcano.com. And you can just send me an email. My phone number is on there too. So if you'd rather not, and I don't put people, in fact, everyone that's signed up for my newsletter, I haven't even sent one out yet. So you're not one of those bombers in your I have so many unread emails from people bombing my email. It's just more a way to connect to see if I'm the right service for you. So send me an email. If you just want an Audible copy, that's all I'll send to you. I'm not going to put you on my newsletter and bomb your inbox. And then I'm on May 21st, and I'm going to be offering again later this year as well. I'm doing a free webinar where we really dive deep into different types of spiritual awakenings and the resources that are available. I will go through the list in the back of my book, take Q&As on that. And there, of course, there'll be a guided meditation at the beginning and end. And then if you're interested in meditation, I will be putting on a free webinar later this year. I don't have the date set yet, but it will have a gentle yoga practice at the beginning. And the whole point of the physical yoga practice that I teach is to make sure your body is ready to sit still. So that you can then meditate deeply, because you don't, aches and pains here and there, tightness there. So if you have any interest in those, just reach out to me through my webpage, and I would love to meet you.
I will make sure to put all of your links in the show notes as well. And as well as the trailer to your book on YouTube, and anything else that, to a new way else for everybody to get a hold of you will be on the show notes as well. So I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. And you have been through quite the journey, and thank you for sharing that. It was very nice to get to talk to you about that. So thank you for sharing that with me and all of us as well. So, and I wish you luck with everything. And I know you got yourself, in your best interest. So I'm glad that you've held off so far with your, surgeries and all that. So, but I wish you the best of luck with that.
Thanks, Jenny.
So thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your Monday and the rest of the week ahead. And we'll talk soon. All right. Thanks, Elisabeth.